Hi everyone, this is Lynn from Calla Patterns. This video series is for the Cosmos bag, which is my second pattern for this year's Carried Away Pattern Collective subscription. This bag can be made in two versions, so you can either make a crossbody bag or you can make a hip bag, or most commonly known as a fanny pack, but I'm going to call it a hip bag. They're pretty much identical. The only difference is that the front panel here is shorter. So the bag here is taller and here it's a little bit shorter. And the other difference is this one is an adjustable crossbody strap, and this one here has a waist strap, and I've included an option for grommet tabs if you're comfortable with grommets. If not, you can use the D-ring tabs on the hip bag as well. Now, before you start, you'll want to print out the pattern and read through the entire thing. You'll also want to decide which version of the bag you're making. If you're making the hip bag or the crossbody bag, then you don't have to print out all of the pattern pieces. For the crossbody bag, you need pages 12 to 15, and for the hip bag, you need pages 15 to 18. Now, note in the pattern pieces section, you'll need to print out for the crossbody bag, you'll need to print out 2 copies of pages 12 and 15, and for the hip bag, you'll need to print out 2 copies of page 15 only. I'm going to go through the pattern pieces in a minute, but first I just want to go over the supplies that you'll need aside from fabric and interfacing. It doesn't require a whole lot of hardware. It just requires 2 1-inch D-rings if you're making the crossbody bag. If you're making the hip bag and you want to use grommets, you're going to need 2 1/2-inch or 15mm grommets. So you'll have to decide which option you're using there and make sure you have the right pieces for that. No matter what version you're using, you're going to need 1 1-inch rectangle slide and 2 1-inch swivels. And the other thing you're going to need is your main zipper. So either a 12-inch pre-made zipper or 13 inches of zipper tape. And for the interior zipper pocket, you'll need 1 8-inch zipper or 10 inches of zipper tape. So I'm using a pre-made 8-inch zipper for my interior pocket, and for my exterior zipper I'm going to use 13 inches of zipper tape. And I only have 1 pull on here right now, but I'm actually going to make it a double pull because I just like the way that it looks. You're also going to need some piping. I use pre-made piping most of the time. And for the crossbody version, you're going to need 24 inches of piping. And for the hip bag, you'll need 20 inches of piping. So I'm going to go over the pattern pieces that you need. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. Hopefully I don't confuse anyone. So for the crossbody bag, you will need to print out pages 12 to 15. On page 12, you have your back panel piece. It looks like this. You need to print out 2 copies. The first copy you will cut out at the outside solid line. The second one you'll cut at the solid line on the fold line, but then the rest you'll cut along the inside dashed line. You'll also need to print out 2 copies of page 15, which is your top panel pattern piece. You'll do the same thing. You'll cut 1 copy at the outside solid line and then the second copy at the inside dash line. Then you'll have your front panel pattern piece. and your gusset pattern piece, which is actually two separate pieces that need to be taped together. So you'll just match up the dash line. You'll see you have two matching star symbols. You just line those up and you tape these pieces together to make your gusset pattern piece. And you'll also need your zipper tab. This you'll need for, and you see it, it's written on the pattern piece here. You need it for the crossbody version and the hip bag version. And I'll get a bag to show you. This is your zipper tab piece right here. It's at the end of your main zipper. And then I wrote here for the D-ring connector. You can use it for either the crossbody bag or the hip bag. If you're not comfortable using grommets for the hip bag, you can go ahead and just use the D-ring connector, same as the crossbody bag. Now, I didn't cut out the pieces for the hip bag because in this video I'm going to make the crossbody bag. I will, however, show you how to do the grommet tabs. So this here is the hip bag version, and I'm going to use it just to show you where all of these different pieces are located on the bag and help you choose your fabrics. So this is your back panel, this is your top panel, this is your front panel, and this is your gusset. These are the grommet tabs here on either side, and your zipper tabs. And then inside the bag, I have it stuffed here, you have your slip pockets. I don't know if you could see it because I used a dark color, unfortunately, but these are your slip pockets, and there's your zipper pocket. And of course your waist strap, and on the crossbody bag it's your adjustable strap. Now here are the hip bag pieces that you're going to need. You do have some pieces in common. The top panel piece is exactly the same for both versions. So again, you're cutting, sorry, you're printing and cutting out 2 copies of page 15. Then for the other pages, you have your front panel piece. I've named them the same between the two versions so that it's less confusing. So your hip bag front panel piece, your hip bag back panel piece, you'll see it's a different size. And this one, you're not printing and cutting 2 copies. You just have the 1 copy. Your gusset piece, which is also a different size. And then your grommet tab, you have 1 pattern piece to cut out your exterior pieces, and then you have a second piece that's just to cut the firm interfacing that we're going to put inside the tab, so that it makes it basically gives more stability to the grommet. Okay, so I'm going to set these pieces aside since I'm not going to be using them just yet. You can use the cutting chart on page 11 to help you cut out all of your pieces, and I'm going to go through my cutout pieces just to show you what they look like once they're cut and interfaced. You'll see on the cutting chart the top section shows the pieces that you need to cut for both versions, and then there's a small section here for the hip bag. You're not going to be able to cut your waist strap until your bag is done. So you don't have to worry about that just yet. Just remember that you'll have to do it a little bit later on. And then you have the crossbody bag section. Now just keep in mind that if you're not comfortable with grommets, you're not going to cut the grommet tab and the tab firm interfacing for the hip bag. You're actually going to cut the D-ring connector as well. Okay, I'm going to organize all of my cut pieces and I'm going to go through them with you. Okay, so I'm going to go through all of my cut and interface pieces now. For the top panel, I have 1 exterior piece. It has fusible woven interfacing, and then I added my fusible fleece. Now, this is a canvas. It's not a quilt weight cotton. It's quite thick, especially with my woven interfacing, which is slightly thicker than normal. So what I did from my fleece is I cut away the seam allowance before I fused it to the wrong side. This is my lining piece with fusible woven interfacing, And this is the firm sew-in interfacing I cut from the piece, the pattern piece that I cut on the inside dash line. For the front panel piece, I have a lining piece and I have an exterior piece, and I did exactly the same thing as I did for the top panel piece, and I cut away the seam allowance from my fusible fleece before I fused it on top of the fusible woven interfacing. Lining piece, fusible woven interfacing, that's it. For the gusset, exactly the same thing as the front panel piece. I have my lining, my exterior, I have fleece with the seam allowance cut away on top of my fusible woven interfacing. Lining just has fusible woven interfacing. My back panel piece. Now the back panel piece is going to be used to cut your exterior. So this is my exterior. And then I use the interior piece, so this is the full piece here, and then the smaller piece at the inside dash line I use to cut my firm sew-in interfacing, which I have used double-sided tape to glue it to the wrong side of my exterior back panel piece. And this is my lining piece with fusible woven interfacing. Now, if you're using fabric for this piece, I'm using vinyl, but if you're using fabric, you're going to have fusible woven interfacing, then your firm sew-in interfacing. Now, you're also going to use this back panel piece to cut your slip pockets for the interior of the bag. And all you'll do is, there's instructions here at the bottom of this pattern piece. You're going to fold the pattern piece at the slip pocket fold line. And you're going to use this bottom portion to cut your slip pockets on the folds. So you see I have two lining pieces with fusible woven interfacing. And that's what I use this pattern piece for. The other pieces you'll need are your interior zipper pocket lining pieces. Now there's a difference in size. If you look at your cutting chart, there's a difference in size if you're doing the crossbody bag or the hip bag. So I'm doing the crossbody bag. So the size of these interior zipper pocket pieces is 10 inches wide by 7 inches high. If you're doing the waist bag, it's going to be the same width, but it's going to be 6 inches high instead of 7 inches high. The zipper pocket facing piece is going to be the same size for both versions. I've cut my zipper tab pieces. That's the smallest little pattern piece you have, or you can cut them to measurements. I've included those on the cutting chart. And I have two lining pieces and two exterior pieces. I wanted to reduce bulk, and since this is canvas, I did not interface it. But if you're using quilt weight cotton, you're going to want to add your interfacing to the wrong side of these, and then my lining pieces are interfaced. I am using my vinyl for my D-ring connectors, so they're not interfaced. I just have cut them using the pattern piece, or again, you can cut to measurements. I've included that on the cutting chart. Now for my crossbody strap. If you're using fabric, you can use the dimensions listed in the pattern, which is 4 inches wide by 58 inches long, or whatever length of strap you prefer. Everybody likes a different strap length, so cut it to the length that you like. Since I'm using vinyl, I want it to be less bulky at the rectangle slide. So if you look on page 3, I have a little note here. If you're making your adjustable strap or your waist strap in vinyl or in cork, you'll want to, there's a link to a video here. This is my Baronia video series, video 5, and it shows you how to make an adjustable strap in vinyl or in cork a little bit differently where it's less bulky at the rectangle slide. And I'll actually show you, because I've done this for my sample bags here. So if you look here at the rectangle slide, I've used that video, the technique in that video, and I actually only have 2 layers of cork wrapped around the bar of my rectangle slide. It does mean you need to cut it differently. So the length is the same, but instead of 4 inches wide, you're going to cut 2 pieces that are 2 inches wide. I'm not going to cover the construction of this strap. You can follow the technique that I have in that video. So that, again, that's video 5 for the Baronia bowler bag video series. Okay, so now we have everything cut and interfaced. We're going to start with the exterior assembly of our bag.